Hello to all of you dear people around the world. Welcome to the third episode of the Elixir of Awareness channel. The name of this episode is Magic of the Way. We want to talk about a journey and talk about how to achieve the greatest personal growth in life. We want to use the teachings of the great psychologist Mr. Carl Gustav Jung to talk about the path through which all human beings reach the highest level of spiritual development. That is to say, they become magicians.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up.
From an innocent child to an orphan, from an orphan to a seeker, from a seeker to a warrior, from a warrior to a caregiver, from a caregiver to an innocent adult, and finally from an innocent adult to a magician.
If there is a dragon on your way, love is like an emerald. So defeat the dragon by using the infinite power of this priceless emerald.
If we read Rumi's last poem, it seems as if he has told the whole story of this magical journey.
Remember, all people can take this journey. This way calls you. The journey that we want to talk about has been done many times throughout history by different people. In fact, by studying this ancient wisdom in humans, we concluded that those who've been able to change the world and leave a positive impression on the world have gone through a similar journey. Prominent people of all times have traveled this path and this journey, and now this journey calls us. This path of heroism and this path of spiritual growth is waiting for the traveler. And in this part, we want to know what changes happen inside us at each stage of this journey, and how we can turn from an innocent child into a magician. A magician is someone who can change the world and make the world a better place. This journey and this path that we want to talk about is designed based on one of the concepts of the great psychologist Carl Gustav Jung. Jung has a very important concept called the archetype. First, we will explain a little about the concept of the archetype, and then we will talk about the trip that we mentioned, the path that will reach the ultimate growth potential of a human being by passing through these archetypes and cities that we'll explain one by one. The main source of this episode is the researches of the famous psychologist Mrs. Carol S. Pearson. Dr. Pearson designed a journey using the concept of Mr. Jung's archetypes that can show us a unique concept of growth. And this is well explained in a book called The Hero Within, which is the main source of this episode. Honestly, we are really excited about the topics we want to talk about. During this episode, we will take help from two sub-stories so that the concept of this trip is better and more clear for you. One of these stories is the story of The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupery, which is one of the most important texts ever written by mankind. And it's full of knowledge and very beautiful tips to know how the little prince turned from an innocent child into a witch in this story. And another story that we will talk about in parallel with our discussion is the story of Rumi, the great Persian poet, one of the greatest humans in history who was able to create awareness for centuries with his beautiful and profound poems. We will discuss how he was able to transform from a simple person to a magician who enchants hearts and minds with his words. We hope that these parallel stories will help us to understand more and better the depth of the concept of the journey that Carl Gustav Jung talks about. But as we said, to better understand this path, we must first get acquainted with the concept of archetypes. Mr. Jung created this concept, and this concept explains that there's a series of old and repetitive behaviors in the existence of all human beings. Let's pay attention to its name again, archetype. Archetypes are fixed algorithms that humans feel and behave with, and if you look at history, you'll notice that these patterns are repeated in all people. That is to say, these internal patterns that include decision-making, behaviors, understandings, and responses have existed in all humans since ancient times. We can find traces of these old patterns in the history of all human beings. Many archetypes were defined after the completion of Jung's theory, but in this episode we want to talk about a limited number of them, which are of course very important. We consider each archetype a city, and by stopping in each city along this exciting route, we'll talk about that archetype in detail. We first go from the archetype of the innocent child to the archetype of the orphan. then from the orphan to the seeker archetype, and from the seeker to the warrior, and then to the innocent adult archetype, and from the innocent adult to the caregiver archetype, and finally to the magician archetype, which is the ultimate growth of a human being. Another important point that we should mention before starting the journey is that archetypes in people have both positive and negative forms. That is to say, an archetype sometimes makes us strong and sometimes weak. For example, the orphan archetype, which we'll explain later, can help us see the world more realistically and better, and it can also make us feel disappointed. Another point is that these archetypes aren't necessarily good or bad. People's stories are different. Sometimes one person uses an archetype positively in his life, and sometimes another person uses it negatively. Our goal is to be able to discover the best aspects of the archetypes in this journey and use them in the best way in our lives. We want to transform from an innocent child to a magician. So let's see what things happen along this exciting route. And what things will we face in this magical way? This is the path that has been traveled many times and times throughout history by different humans. On the winding path of this heroic journey, the footsteps of great men and women can be seen. We followed their footsteps and found out how they reached the highest level of personal development. They've experienced different moments on this trip, moments that sometimes included fears and doubts, and sometimes included many joys and sufferings. But the first place where our journey begins is the city or the archetype of the innocent child. The innocent child is an archetype that has existed in all human beings. If this archetype is active in someone, that person is full of optimism and, of course, full of expectations from others. Just like an innocent child who thinks there is no suffering in the world, life is always perfect, parents should always be ideal and think everything will always be perfect in any situation. When this archetype is active in us, we think that we can have everything. We think that to have something, we just need to will, without even having to make an effort. We're drowning in absolute optimism, but we've to enter the real world somewhere and end our extreme optimism. A person may have lived for 70 years, but hasn't even started this journey yet, meaning that they have made a home for 70 years in the same first city of the archetype of the innocent child, and has stopped. The innocent child, because it's very optimistic. Everything is against its optimistic imagination and expectations. It is waiting for others to build heaven for it, and that is why it always full of complaints. So if this archetype is active in a person, they are always upset with others. The innocent child always says something like this: I did something for them, and they responded like this, or they wronged me, or this was not my right, and I didn't expect this reaction. You know, it seems that the innocent child is always looking for a savior. People's awareness does not increase with age unless they really want to become more aware themselves. The innocent child archetype is where we experience the least spiritual growth and we are in our weakest human state. Sufferings happen in people's lives. In the lives of all people, things may happen that are beyond their control. And sometimes this suffering and these sharp edges of reality suddenly burst the thin bubble of optimism. And if a person is still in the innocent child archetype, makes another bubble of optimism and takes refuge in it, and they repeat this process many times and times. But here some other people experience the first stage of spiritual growth, and they become an orphan. And they enter the second stage of the growth path, which is the archetypal of the orphan. The first and the most important stage of the growth path is this stage. It means when we transform from an innocent child to an orphan. That is to say, when our optimistic expectations from people are reduced to the minimum possible, and we no longer wait for anyone to save us, and we understand that we've to do something for ourselves. That's when we ask the name of the Savior from the mirror, and then realize the Savior is ourselves. But unfortunately, many people aren't yet an orphan and have not yet taken this big step. The story of Buddha, the prophet of the East, can help to better understand this archetype. Buddha was a prince who was born in his father's big palace, and his father was so fond of him that he didn't want Buddha to face the suffering of the world. He was locked in a palace. And he was experiencing a world that was very different from the world behind the palace walls, that is, the real world. For example, Buddha didn't know that humans die. If a person from the palace or family had died, others were telling him that the person has traveled and not died. Buddha didn't know that death is the end of humans. Also, Buddha didn't know that people get sick. If someone around him got sick, he was treated away from Buddha's eyes. Buddha didn't know that people grow old. His servants were always young people, and his parents also showed themselves in such a way that they always looked young and fresh. He didn't know the sufferings of the world. That is to say, Buddha was an innocent child. Until one day one of the guards neglected and leaves the palace door open and Buddha entered the real world. He enters from a small garden to a big forest, which means the real world. Buddha faces the realities and sufferings of life, and this makes his optimism slowly give way to a deep realism. Buddha gets acquainted with pain, suffering, fear, poverty, war, illness, old age, and many other realities, and this is the starting point of his becoming a prophet. When he stares into the world's suffering, he realizes that the world isn't always according to his sweet expectations, and he becomes an orphan at this stage. At the stage when we change from an innocent child to an orphan, in our mind we reach from the land of should to the land of is. In the archetype of the innocent child, our mind is full of shoulds that are in our favor. We say the world should be the way I want, everything should go the way I want, I should have what I want, I should, and many other shoulds. But when we become orphans, we come to the reality that despite all the good wishes we imagine for ourselves in life, sometimes life is out of our control. Sometimes life away from our hands can be hard and bitter. And sometimes life can be against our sweet expectations from the world. That's why we say, in this stage, we reach from the land of should to the land of is. Our dear friends, this part of our journey is very painful. The characteristic of this part of the hero's journey is that it's accompanied by suffering. We mean when the world finds a way to take us out of our safe nest till we face the realities. But not all people understand that they can transform suffering into awareness. Many times their expectations about people and how they should behave end in despair, and they still don't stop dreaming. Some people still think that the world and people can be controlled. But we want to say that one day we've to decide to come out of our cocoon so that we can become butterflies. We've to get out of innocence and end all these sweet expectations from others. Many of us are still attached to others' help and living in our own bubble of optimism. But we've to decide one day to pass this stage. This happened in Rumi's life when he met Shams Tabrizi, the famous mystic of the 6th century. Rumi had a very respectable and reliable character among the people, and he was pleased with the prestige and fame he had among the people, and he was feeling proud. People kissed his hand and respected him a lot, until one day Rumi met Shams Tabrizi, and that meeting was the beginning of Rumi's orphanhood. And he took the first step of spiritual growth. The first thing that Shams Tabrizi did to Rumi was that he took away all the false credit of Rumi that had made him unable to reach his full potential. And suddenly, all the respect that had cast a shadow on that fertile little seedling so that it couldn't grow, disappeared. In the first step, Shams asked Rumi to go to the big market in the Armenian neighborhood of Konya city located in Turkey on a very busy afternoon and sit there with a bottle of wine in his hand. Shams wanted all people to see how the famous and dignified man of the city holds a bottle of wine, because he wanted Rumi to lose all his respect and credibility which had hindered his growth. With that bottle of wine in his hand in front of the eyes of the people of the city, with every step he took in that neighborhood, Rumi stepped on all the credit and respect that had made him unable to reach perfection. Rumi describes his feelings in the form of a few lines of poetry like this.
I was a devout, but you made me a busker, and you caused that I looked like a drunkard and frivolous person at social gathering. I was a dignified believer person, but you made that everyone, even the local children, make fun of me and make me plaything for themselves.
Also, Rumi writes about the description of this stage like this.
I was so lost in the journey of love that I even disappeared from the two worlds of life and death. Do not ask about my name and reputation anymore in the world, because I disappeared in terms of my identity, and no one knows my name and fame anymore. I got lost. And even I don't know myself anymore, and I don't know how I got lost.
In these poems, he explains how he goes far away from all the name and credit he had. Our dear friends, let's think about one thing. Have we become orphans in our lives? Have we been able to make our expectations from the world and people more realistic and reduce them to the minimum possible? Where did we become orphans in our lives? What suffering did you experience in life that caused your worldview to change? What's your story? But in the story of the little prince, it happens like this. Once upon a time, there was a little prince who was cleaning volcanoes in his asteroid. And actually he was an innocent child. Suddenly, from where we don't know where, a red flower seed fell into the soil of his asteroid, but a flower that was different from all the flowers that the little prince had seen before. That red flower grew little by little, and the little prince saw it. And he fell in love with his red flower.
I soon learned to know this flower better. On the little prince's planet, the flowers had always been very simple. They had only one ring of petals. They took up no room at all. They were a trouble to nobody. One morning they would appear in the grass, and by night they would have faded peacefully away. But one day, from a seed blown from no one knew where, a new flower had come up, and the little prince had watched very closely over this small sprout, which was not like any other small sprouts on his planet. It might, you see, have been a new kind of baobab. The shrub soon stopped growing and began to get ready to produce a flower. The little prince, who was present at the first appearance of a huge bud, felt at once that some sort of miraculous apparition must emerge from it. But the flower was not satisfied to complete the preparations for her beauty in the shelter of her green chamber. She chose her colors with the greatest care. She adjusted her petals one by one. She did not wish to go out into the world all rumpled, like the field poppies. It was only in the full radiance of her beauty that she wished to appear. Oh yes, she was a coquettish creature, and her mysterious adornment lasted for days and days. Then one morning, exactly at sunrise, she suddenly showed herself. And after working with all this painstaking precision, she yawned and said,
"Ah, I am scarcely awake. I beg that you will excuse me. My petals are still all disarranged."
But the little prince could not restrain his admiration.
"Oh, how beautiful you are."
Am I not? I was born at the same moment as the sun.
The little prince could guess easily enough that she was not any too modest, but how moving and exciting she was.
I think it is time for breakfast, if you would have the kindness to think of my needs.
And the little prince, completely abashed, went to look for a sprinkling can of fresh water. So he tended the flower. So, too, she began very quickly to torment him with her vanity, which was, if the truth be known, a little difficult to deal with. One day, for instance, when she was speaking of her 4 thorns, she said to the little prince,
"Let the tigers come with their claws."
But there are no tigers on my planet, and anyway, tigers do not eat weed.
But I am not a weed. Okay, I'm sorry, please excuse me. I am not at all afraid of tigers, but I have a horror of airflow.
A horror of airflow? That is bad luck for a plant. This flower is a very complex creature.
I suppose you wouldn't have a screen for me. At night I want you to put me under a glass globe. It is very cold where you live, in the place I came from.
But his flower was very bad-mannered. The little prince just realized that love seems simple at first, but it has problems. At this moment, the little prince becomes an orphan and is forced to leave his asteroid. One sad day, the little prince says goodbye to his flower and moves to the next stage of personal development, and he becomes an orphan.
I believe that for his escape he took advantage of the migration of a flock of wild birds. On the morning of his departure, he put his planet in perfect order. He carefully cleaned out his active volcanoes. He also pulled up, with a certain sense of dejection, the last little shoots of the baobabs. He believed that he would never want to return. But on this last morning, all these familiar tasks seemed very precious to him. And when he watered the flower for the last time and prepared to place her under the shelter of her glass globe, he realized that he was very close to tears.
Knowledge is the companion of sorrow. This means that the more we know in the first stage of awareness, the more sad we may become. Of course, in the continuation of the journey, we will explain how this same awareness can end in a deep pleasure. But the first stage of awareness is that we face sadness. Here we have to face the bitter truths of life. In the previous episode, we explained how this realism can save love. At this stage, we reach the same kind of awareness. By becoming an orphan, we learn a few important things about the world. The truth is that everything changes, and only it's change that does not change ever. Changing the essence is without changing the world. Everything changes and ends. We've no control over these changes, and we can't do anything. In this kind of acceptance, we understand that things don't always go according to our wishes. In the depth of this awareness, we conclude that sometimes life isn't fair, and of course, it isn't cruel either. We understand that the world is very big while we aren't, and sometimes our eager attempts to control the events of the world fail. We see the role of random events in the formation of our destiny and realize that suffering is a part of life. We understand that people aren't always kind and loyal. We understand that the world isn't simple but complex, and sometimes we cannot impose the order we want on the world, and sometimes we need to adapt to disorder. We understand that humans aren't perfect, and we accept imperfections. And we understand that our knowledge about the surrounding world, events, metaphysics, the universe, and God is limited. And then we come to doubt, and this doubt is humility before the greatness of existence. We realize that sometimes many questions don't have answers, and sometimes life isn't meaning these answers but is living these questions. That is to say, we live even though we know that sometimes there may be no answers to our questions. In this type of acceptance, we reach a realistic understanding of the world. As we said, people's reactions to suffering are different. It is possible that some people, despite facing suffering, never leave the archetype of the innocent child and stop their spiritual growth at this stage. But how can we become an orphan? First, we should see suffering and not deny it. The modern world has made many tools to avoid facing and thinking about suffering. And secondly, we touch the suffering and don't run away from it and bravely face our pains. In the next step, we should be able to examine our suffering and try to find its causes, as well as analyze our reactions to those sufferings. Friends, if we close all the doors to our sufferings, nothing else will enter also. Maybe this will stop the sufferings from entering, but on the other hand, we won't experience many other pleasures and good feelings also. A movie dialogue says, "Do you know what is good about dying? It is that you won't die again." And we think the good thing about becoming an orphan is that after you see reality as it is, the power of bad things to surprise you'll be lost, and as a result, you can be stronger. Dying once is better than dying every second. It is better to stop your expectations from others once than to be disappointed by them again and again. Once time seeing one's own powerlessness in front of the events of the world is better than a lifetime of trying in vain to change uncontrollable things. Of course, these things don't mean being passive in any way. You will find out as you continue this journey that you're supposed to learn how to act and enter the real world. And at the end of this journey, we'll learn how to make the world the better place than what we want it to be. But after the orphan stage, we reach the second step of this magical journey, that is to say, the seeker archetype. After being orphaned, now with this experience that has transformed our consciousness, we can take the next step. This part of the journey is the beginning of an intellectual and spiritual adventure. After our expectations of the world and people have realistically changed, we're ready to take the next step and become a seeker. At this stage, we start searching and asking and answering our basic questions so that we can find good and logical answers for them. But a very important point that we must pay attention to is that we must first become an orphan so that we can become a genuine seeker after that. Because as long as we're under the authority of others and have false expectations from them and shape our mental framework with their thoughts, we can't search. That's why it's very important that we should be orphaned first, so that we can search for our own answers to important questions. In the story of Rumi's life, after he was able to let go of the pride that had limited his growth, he distanced himself from the crowd and now, once again, with a more relaxed mind and a lighter spirit, together with Shams Tabrizi, they began to search for important answers about life. Basic questions about religion, about life, God, happiness, and suffering. And in this personal search, Rumi started to ponder and think, and many of his previous mental beliefs were changed in these searches. And it was here that Rumi was able to enter a new level of awareness in the path of his personal growth. In the story of the Little Prince, this stage happened to him like this. When the little prince leaves his flower, he travels to different planets and learns very valuable things about life by meeting and getting to know different people and philosophies. This is how the little prince becomes a seeker after becoming an orphan. He challenges the obvious things that other people have accepted and looks for deeper answers.
The first of them was inhabited by a king. Clad in royal purple and ermine, he was seated upon a throne which was at the same time both simple and majestic. When the king saw the little prince coming, exclaimed,
"Ah, here is a subject."
And the little prince asked himself,
How could he recognize me when he had never seen me before?
he did not know how the world is simplified for kings. To them, all men are subjects.
Approach, so that I may see you better.
The grown-ups are very strange.
The second planet was inhabited by a conceited man. He exclaimed from afar when he first saw the little prince coming,
I am about to receive a visit from an admirer.
For to conceited men, all other men are admirers. The little prince said to himself.
The grown-ups are very strange.
The next planet was inhabited by a tippler. This was a very short visit, but it plunged the little prince into deep dejection.
What are you doing there?
I am drinking,
Why are you drinking?
so that I may forget
Forget what?
my shame,
Shame about what?
or ashamed of drinking.
The grown-ups are certainly very, very odd.
The fourth planet belonged to a businessman. This man was so much occupied that he did not even raise his head at the little prince's arrival.
3 and 2 make 5, 5 and 7 make 12.
Good morning.
12 and 3 make 15. Good morning. 15 and 7 make 22.
Your cigarette has gone out.
22 and 6 make 28. I haven't time to light it again. 26 and 5 make 31. Then that makes 501,622,731.
500 million what?
Are you still there? 501 million. I can't stop. I have so much to do. I am concerned with matters of consequence. I don't amuse myself with balderdash. 2 and 5 make 7, 22, and 6 make 28, 26, and 5 make 31. Then that makes 501,622,731. 501 million.
501 million what?
Little Prince never in his life had let go of a question once he had asked it. The businessman raised his head.
Millions of what?
The businessman suddenly realized that there was no hope of being left in peace until he answered this question.
Millions of those little objects, which one sometimes sees in the sky.
Flies?
Oh no, little glittering objects.
Bees?
Oh no, little golden objects that set lazy men to idle dreaming. As for me, I am concerned with matters of consequence. There is no time for idle dreaming in my life.
Ah, you mean the stars?
Yes, that's it. The stars.
And what do you do with 500 millions of stars?
501,622,731. I am concerned with matters of consequence. I am accurate.
And what do you do with these stars?
What do I do with them?
Yes.
Nothing. I own them.
You own the stars?
Yes.
But I have already seen a king who owns everything.
Kings do not own. They reign over. It is a very different matter.
Alright. And what good does it to you to own the stars?
It does me the good of making me rich.
And what good does it to you to be rich?
It makes it possible for me to buy more stars if any are ever discovered.
Little Prince said to himself.
The grown-ups are certainly very, very odd.
And then he continued on his journey. The fifth planet was very strange. It was the smallest of all. There was just enough room on it for a street lamp and a lamplighter. The little prince was not able to reach any explanation of the use of a street lamp and a lamplighter somewhere in the heavens on a planet which had no people. When he arrived on the planet, he respectfully saluted the lamplighter.
Good morning. Why have you just put out your lamp?
Those are the orders. Good morning.
What are the orders?
The orders are that I put out my lamp. Good evening.
And he lighted his lamp again.
But why have you just lighted it again?
I said those are the orders.
I do not understand.
There is nothing to understand. Orders are orders. Good morning.
And he put out his lamp.
I follow a terrible profession. In the old days it was reasonable. I put the lamp out in the morning, and in the evening I lighted it again. I had the rest of the day for relaxation and the rest of the night for sleep.
And the orders have been changed since that time?
The orders have not been changed. That is the tragedy. From year to year, the planet has turned more rapidly, and the orders have not been changed.
Then what?
Then the planet now makes a complete turn every minute, and I no longer have a single second for repose. Once every minute I have to light my lamp and put it out.
The sixth planet was 10 times larger than the last one. It was inhabited by an old gentleman who wrote voluminous books.
Oh, look, here is an explorer. Where do you come from?
What is that big book? What are you doing?
I am a geographer.
What is a geographer?
A geographer is a scholar who knows the location of all the seas, rivers, towns, mountains, and deserts.
Ah, that is very interesting. Here at last is a man who has a real profession.
And then he cast a look around him at the planet of the geographer. It was the most magnificent and stately planet that he had ever seen.
Your planet is very beautiful. Has it any oceans?
I couldn't tell you.
Ah. Has it any mountains?
I couldn't tell you.
And towns, and rivers, and deserts?
I couldn't tell you that either.
But you are a geographer.
Exactly, but I am not an explorer. I haven't a single explorer on my planet. It is not the geographer who goes out to count the towns, the rivers, the mountains, the seas, the oceans, and the deserts. The geographer is much too important to go loafing about. He does not leave his desk.
The grown-ups are certainly very, very odd.
The story of the seeker begins in the captivity of previous beliefs. There is a place in life where many of the answers that we were certain about them are no longer valid, and little by little the cracks of doubt appear in the structure of our thoughts. And this means the call to search. It is as if a voice in the sky of our soul is calling us to search for better and deeper answers. People around say to the hero who wants to enter this stage of the magical journey, "Wait, where are you going?" They say the cage is good and safe enough, and outside the cage is dangerous for you, and in this stage, the environment attacks the seeker. However, the person leaves the city of others' beliefs and steps into the new path of the unknown. The suffering of searching is in loneliness. If an orphan finds himself in pain, the seeker can find his own path in the experience of solitude. Throughout history, every man and woman who has done something great has felt loneliness to the core of their bones and embraced loneliness. As a result, they were able to move the torch of consciousness a few meters further into the heart of darkness and expand the boundaries of human consciousness. But as we said, the suffering of this stage is loneliness. Here, Rumi becomes painful from this search and says,
"How long should I look for you from a house to another house? And how much longer will you continue to escape from one place to another?"
How long should I look for you? Look at the educational and economic systems of the world. This world capitalizes on our lack of love and weakness, so we try hard to get things so that others will love us more. The big media try to control people in such a way that even their most basic needs and burning feelings eventually conform to the same collective values. The world draws an invisible frame around people's minds so that they search for answers to their questions in the same limited area. And this is against the growth of a human being. Therefore, our mission in life is to search for answers to our questions beyond the boundaries that the world has set for us. Friends, we in this search process, in addition to knowing the world around us, also travel inside ourselves. The magic of this way is that people first travel inside themselves and then take the next step from inside to outside. In this path of search, we understand very important things like, where are my weaknesses? How could I have been affected by past sufferings? Who am I? And what's my responsibility in this world? Another important point is that when we experience any of the archetypes, this experience should always be with us. I mean that our search never ends in life. It's not like we say to ourselves, for example, "I'll search for a year and get the answers I want, and then everything will be over." No, it's not like this. The essence of this search is in its continuity, in searching more and more, and this search is with us throughout the journey. Now let's go to the next city and take the next step in the path of personal growth. The next step is to go from the archetype of the seeker to the archetype of the warrior. After learning the archetype of the seeker now, with this spiritual power we can take the next step and enter the city of the warrior. After we've searched for some basic questions and arrived at a series of general and acceptable answers, now is the time to realize your dreams and goals. Now we know what we can change and what we can't, and we focus on the moments when our actions, our thoughts, our feelings, and our behavior can be more effective. Now we fight to slay the dragon our inside and outside. In the seeker archetype, we understand what we need to get, and in the warrior archetype, we take action to get those things we want. In this part of the story, the little prince, after searching on many planets and getting answers to his questions, meets the fox, and the fox teaches the little prince how to tame everything. To tame means to get. It means to make someone interested, and to have those things that we like.
It was then that the fox appeared.
If you want a friend, tame me.
What must I do to tame you?
You must be very patient. First you will sit down at a little distance from me like that in the grass. I shall look at you out of the corner of my eye, and you will say nothing. Words are the source of misunderstandings. But you will sit a little closer to me every day.
The next day the little prince came back.
It would have been better to come back at the same hour if, for example, you come at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, then at 3 o'clock I shall begin to be happy. I shall feel happier and happier as the hour advances. At 4 o'clock, I shall already be worrying and jumping about. I shall show you how happy I am, but if you come at just any time, I shall never know at what hour my heart is to be ready to greet you. One must observe the proper rites.
What is a rite?
Those also are actions too often neglected. They are what make one day different from other days, 1 hour from other hours.
Do you remember we said that the orphan was always looking for a savior? But here in the warrior city, that orphan themselves are fighting to save themselves. The important ability of a warrior is to endure pain. They has become aware that they now lasts longer and better, and a much more important point is that they now knows what they're fighting for. And this is very significant and important. So we conclude that the order of archetypes is also very important. For example, the fact that the seeker archetype is before the warrior archetype has a valuable point, and that point is that we know what we're fighting to get. There are many people who are madly trying to get in life, but maybe the things they're trying for aren't their real desires. They grow potatoes to eat potatoes so that they can grow potatoes again. And this is the description of consumer society by the French philosopher Baudrillard. That is to say, they're in a repetitive cycle. But a person who has passed through the seeker city and is familiar with the concept of the archetype of the seeker knows that of course they must strive for their dreams. But their reasons for this effort aren't limited to material things. Of course, material things are so important in life. This is how a person will feel the depth of happiness with all their being. Our world is full of warriors who close their eyes and fight for things that don't bring them true happiness. Socrates says that only a thoughtful life is worth living. Is our life the same? Did we search well? Are the reasons for our struggles real in life? Do we have conscious reasons for waking up every morning from sleep? The answers to these questions are very important. Another point is that if we've experienced the seeker stage long enough before the warrior, then our fight's reasons become wiser. We at warrior archetype want to leave a mark of ourselves in the world that will remain forever. The more authentic a warrior we're, the less violence we use because our awareness has increased, so less energy is needed. A good example of a genuine warrior would be Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi won the war for independence through moral force and minimal violence because he knew what he was fighting for and how to fight it. Other people like Nelson Mandela or Martin Luther King, when he was talking about a dream. When he said, "I have a dream," this dream was for all people, both white and black.
That one day, this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream.
True warrior is humble and forgiving. They knows that the flaw isn't the weak point of us humans, and many times this is the reality of us humans. Here in the story of Rumi. After searching, he realizes what he has found and shows the new awareness he has experienced to the general public, and this awareness is also visible in his poems. He starts to fight, of course, without violence, and just using his beautiful and magical words. Rumi says,
"Blessed is a gambler who lost all their possessions. Nothing remained of their assets, except the longing for another gamble."
Here Rumi talks about the achievements of his spiritual efforts. Here Rumi advises all seekers to start exploring.
If your beloved is fire, go and burn in their flames. Throughout the night of separation, burn like a candle till dawn. Where there is discord brings harmony, and when the others tear your garment, you must sew the garments of peace and union. Don't say all are fighting. What use is my lone call for peace? You're not one, but thousands light your beacon.
Wow. Look how brilliant just this one bit is.
Don't say all are fighting. What use is my lone call for peace? You're not one, but thousands light your beacon.
It indicates how necessary and valuable it's for all human beings to carry out this personal mission. But in the next step, we reach a new stage of our journey. After we've taken action to have, achieve, and to fulfill our dreams, and when we've slain the dragons within and without, we move from warrior city to the next city, which is the archetype of the caregiver. In the caregiver archetype, after we've reached something, we reach this spiritual strength to be able to give. The theme of one of Margot Bickle's brilliant poems is that I can hold someone with one hand and connect them to life because I'm connected to the world with the other hand. As we mentioned, the order of archetypes is very important. That the warrior is before the caregiver, it is a very brilliant point. Because we must first be able to do something for ourselves and then be able to extend our hands to others and forgive what we got. First, we must be strong ourselves to be able to support others. Some people are supportive and caregiver before they experience the warrior archetype, and this is a very important point. Look at many parents, they're just selfless and always give everything to their children and just support, and even if they don't get anything, they give of themselves. When children see parents who are caring and self-sacrificing but don't do anything for themselves, they also learn by observing that they shouldn't fight for themselves in the future and don't try to get anything. We must save ourselves first. When the plane is falling, we must first put on our own oxygen mask and then put on the mask of other people. We're destroying ourselves by neglecting ourselves. Many people say that we should love everyone, but the point is that we should be able to love ourselves first so that we can love others as much as we do. Do we love ourselves? Did we do anything for ourselves? We think the richest form of relationship is to love ourselves and at the same time help who we love to love themselves and achieve their dreams and aspirations, and this is the healthiest relationship in the world. Jung says that the only measure of the health of a family is that all its members have an equal capacity for growth. In our family, do all members have an equal capacity to grow? In some families, some members are sacrificed and some don't live so that others can live. So it's very important that if we're a caregiver, have we experienced the warrior archetype before it? Sacrifice is considered a virtue when it's voluntary. That is to say, when we have the ability, we decide to do favors to others voluntarily, not out of necessity. It means that we choose to sacrifice ourselves, and this choice is based on awareness, not on compulsion. Of course, this doesn't mean that relationships must be selfish. Many times people must be selfless to experience depth of the relationship. In the caregiver archetype, we can give away the things we've acquired. And we also understand that if we stop storing our awareness, ideas, knowledge, and even emotions, and share them with others, we can take a step to the next stage of the growth path. In the story of the little prince, after the fox teaches the little prince how to tame, then teaches him that he's responsible for his flower. Also, Rumi says about this,
"Now I am like a harp that is completely at your disposal. You can play any song with me with any rhythm and beat you like."
In the experience of the archetype of the caregiver archetype, Rumi begins to transfer knowledge and experience to others, and he passes his teachings to others with patience and skill unique. He stops hoarding knowledge and generously shares his awareness with others. Let's take a quick look at what we've talked about so far. We started with the archetype of the innocent child and reached the orphan, and after the orphan, we reached the seeker, and after the seeker, we reached the warrior, and then the caregiver archetype. But now is the time that we slowly reach the reward of this journey after the difficult path we experienced in this journey. It means that we turn from a caregiver to an innocent adult. Do you remember we said that the innocent child was full of expectations and sweet expectations from others? The innocent adult archetype is similar to the innocent child, but with the difference that they were an innocent child but now they are an innocent adult. But there's only one significant difference, so please listen to this part carefully. The innocent child expected to receive paradise as a gift and others would build it for them, but the innocent adult builds heaven themselves. It's an innocent adult with all the spiritual path they has traveled, but they has reached the awareness and power to be in paradise, but the paradise that they made themselves, not others. An innocent adult throughout the entire spiritual path they has traveled. They has attained the consciousness and power to be in paradise, but the paradise they made themselves, not others. After we found out that there was a dragon in Orphan City, and we faced the dragon in Seeker City, and then we killed the dragon in Warrior City, and after that, in the caregiver archetype, we divided the spoils of the war with the dragon among all. Now we reach the peak of pleasure in the innocent adult. The innocence of an innocent child is very different from the innocence of an innocent adult. In this stage, the innocent adult experiences true joy and happiness, and this is the reward for the difficult path that they has traveled. Rumi's poems are much more audible here.
"I am overwhelmed with infinite joy and I'm so happy."
But this joy isn't due to the denial of suffering. He has seen and faced suffering all along the way, but this joy is due to his power in a new analysis of suffering. The innocent adult has reached the power that while they has felt suffering, they can have an interpretation of it so that suffering no longer means suffering, and sometimes even means beauty. Here, the hero of this journey meets God, but not like the previous meetings, which were sometimes accompanied by fear or superstition, and sometimes by anger or complaints. Rather, the nature of this meeting is love. The joy of realizing that we're a part of this love and God is love is so great that human beings become intoxicated by this real pleasure and experience the peak of happiness. In describing this happiness, Rumi says,
"I was dead. I became alive. I was weeping. I became laughing. Then the power of love swept my soul, and I became everlasting power."
Also, he says in another verse like this,
"Well done, love. Well done, love which is ours. How marvelous, how good, and how beautiful it is. O God, how warm we are from this sun-alike love. How hidden and how visible it is. O God, well done enthusiasm. Well done enthusiasm which excites the world. Well done work. Well done weight which is there, O God. We felt down like we never raise up. We don't know what disturbance has been raised up."
Even in the song of this poem, this enthusiasm and this happiness are obvious. In the innocent adult, the doors of inspiration in personal life are opened. In the innocent adult archetype, people can do extraordinary things because they're connected to the intuitive force that helps them. In an innocent adult, the boundaries of the person's soul expand and there is no longer a distance between them and the world. At this stage, the person reaches the ability to name the world, that is to say, they can give meaning to phenomena. In the Bible, it's said that in the beginning there was the Word, and there was nothing except the Word, and God was there. And God creates the world by naming. Humans can also reach the power to change the nature of phenomena by naming and interpreting them, such as suffering, which does not mean suffering from an innocent adult's point of view. At this stage, people realize how much inner strength they have. As the orphan allows pain to enter their soul city, while the seeker experiences deep loneliness as the warrior fights their fears, and while the supporter struggles with their own selfishness, an innocent adult reaches a stage where they learns how to allow true faith, love, and pleasure to enter their soul, and allows this pleasure to permeate every cell of their body. And how wonderful this stage is. An innocent adult without pretending that pain is unreal. They can define that face of suffering in a different frame of mind so that suffering is no longer painful for them, and they reaches this spiritual power. In a part of the story of the Little Prince, he explains how to discover the hidden pleasures in the world. He talks about the joy of discovering a well in the heart of the desert. It talks about being immersed in the magic of the world and watching the amazing beauty of the world. The Little Prince explains how ordinary things can be so beautiful and wonderful.
He was tired. He sat down. I sat down beside him, and after a little silence he spoke again.
The stars are beautiful, because of a flower that cannot be seen.
I replied, yes, that is so. And, without saying anything more, I looked across the ridges of sand that were stretched out before us in the moonlight.
The desert is beautiful.
And that was true. I have always loved the desert. One sits down on a desert sand dune, sees nothing, hears nothing. Yet through the silence something throbs and gleams.
What makes the desert beautiful is that somewhere it hides a well.
I said to myself, again, what moves me so deeply about this little prince who is sleeping here is his loyalty to a flower, the image of a rose that shines through his whole being like the flame of a lamp, even when he is asleep. As I walked on so, I found the well at daybreak. It was as sweet as some special festival treat. This water was indeed a different thing from ordinary nourishment. Its sweetness was born of the walk under the stars, the song of the pulley, the effort of my arms. It was good for the heart, like a present.
At this stage of the journey, the innocent adult arrives home, to the place that they always needed to be there and to find it. And now they watches the world real and pure. Now the important question is, where's your home? In this journey, have you reached the eyes that can see and recognize the hidden beauties of the world? Have you become an innocent adult? Where are we in the story? Where are we on this amazing journey? Now you may say to yourself, is this the end of the journey? Now that we've reached this great reward and have become innocent adults, then what's that final stage? So what's a magician? Is it possible to go further? And we want to say yes, it's possible. The last step of the journey is passing through the innocent adult city and reaching the magician city. It means turning from an innocent adult into a magician. This is the peak of a human being's development. That is to say, all their inherent talents are revealed. It means that all their hidden powers are revealed. But how does this happen? Do you remember at the beginning of this trip we explained how people turn from an innocent child to an orphan? Do you remember that we were experiencing forced suffering? Just like the story of Adam and Eve, that they're forcibly sent from heaven to this suffering planet, Earth. We also experienced a kind of forced suffering in turning from an innocent child to an orphan, with the difference that this time it isn't forced suffering, but completely optional suffering. After we've made heaven with our own hands, after we dwell in the beauty of the world, there comes a time when we decide to lock the door of that heaven by our own will and enter the world full of suffering again, but this time to help others and to do magic. The peak of this journey is when a person reaches a level of awareness and growth that no longer wants perfection only for themselves, and they steps from their paradise to the land full of suffering and life of other people to help them and teach them how to build their own paradise. This is the peak of a human being's growth. This is the peak of spiritual growth. In the Rumi life story, Shams Tabrizi in Baghdad city located in Iraq was in his paradise and was immersed in his happiness and awareness, but at one point he decided to travel to the city of Konya in Turkey. Even though only God knows how much he was persecuted by the people around him, but he finds Rumi and makes him so magical that with Rumi's magic, awareness is spread through his words and poems for centuries. If innocent adult could give meaning to the phenomena. In addition to phenomena, the magician can also give meaning to humans. At this stage, the person reaches the peak of miracles, and it's like a call for others to start their journey also. The pure spiritual power generated along the journey gives the magician the power to change the world. The innocent adult evaluates the world as good, while the magician makes the world a good place. A magician can make the world a better and more beautiful place, not only from their own point of view but also from the point of view of others. It seems that the status of prophets, thinkers, and great people is the status of creating a human being, not in the sense that they create someone, but in the sense that by changing the perspective of a human being, they make them reborn. And isn't this itself a kind of creation? We think this is the peak of human growth. Most of you've heard the story of Beast and Beauty. In this story, Beauty is a magician. Because Beauty's love turns the Beast into a human, Beauty's love has a magic that discovers something more sublime in the Beast and makes it grow within him. Here in the story of the little prince, he meets the snake. A snake that is as narrow as a finger but is more powerful than the finger of any king. In this part of story, the snake is a symbol of death, the little prince is an innocent adult. But he chooses to travel to another world with the experience of death. Maybe he will return to his flower and start magic there. It is interesting that at the end, both the little prince and the pilot, who's the narrator of this story, both return to their own world. And it seems that both of them become witches along the way. The scene of the little prince's encounter with the snake and his transformation from an innocent adult to a magician is extremely bitter but very spectacular.
When I succeeded in catching up with him, he was walking along with a quick and resolute step. He said to me merely,
"Ah, you are there, it was wrong of you to come, you will suffer, I shall look as if I were dead, and that will not be true, you understand? It is too far, I can't carry this body with me, it is too heavy, but it will be like an old abandoned shell, there is nothing sad about old shells."
I said nothing. He was a little discouraged, but he made one more effort.
"You know, it will be very nice, I too shall look at the stars, all the stars will be wells with a rusty pulley, all the stars will pour out fresh water for me to drink, that will be so amusing, you will have 500 million little bells, and I shall have 500 million springs of fresh water."
And he too said nothing more, because he was crying.
"Here it is, let me go on by myself."
And he sat down because he was afraid. Then he said again,
"You know my flower, I am responsible for her. And she is so weak. She is so naive. She has 4 thorns of no use at all to protect herself against all the world."
I too sat down, because I was not able to stand up any longer. He still hesitated a little, then he got up. He took one step. I could not move. There was nothing but a flash of yellow close to his ankle. He remained motionless for an instant. He did not cry out. He fell as gently as a tree falls. There was not even any sound because of the sand.
Here Rumi says,
"If even in hell I can reach you, I don't need to be in heaven anymore. If I am going to go to heaven without you, even in heaven I will not have peace, and I will not stay there."
Do you see? Even Rumi also once again leaves his paradise. He feels that he has a special mission, then enters our world and enchants our world with his words and poems. If we read Rumi's last poem, it seems as if he has told the whole story of this magical journey.
If there is a dragon on your way, love is like an emerald. So defeat the dragon by using the infinite power of this priceless emerald.
The last verse of this great man's life seems to be his last message. These sufferings and pains and struggles and all the bittersweet experiences of life seem to be summed up in the last things he told us. If there is a dragon on your way, love is like an emerald. So defeat the dragon by using the infinite power of this priceless emerald. And we think that this emerald is the great latent force within us that we need to discover and use in the spiritual battles of life to win over the dragon of life. We can start this journey with the same emerald inside us, which is inside every human being, on the condition that we find this part of our being that has become dusty and that we lost it. and wipe the dust of time from it and start our journey. Just see how beautifully Rumi says,
Everything you want is not outside of you. Search in yourself for everything you want. Everything is in you.
Dear friends, in the end, we want to say that maybe the spiritual sufferings we experience are our call to start the journey. So when and where do we start our journey? What an exciting yet difficult and enjoyable trip it was. From an innocent child to an orphan, from an orphan to a seeker, from a seeker to a warrior, from a warrior to a caregiver, from a caregiver to an innocent adult, and finally from an innocent adult to a magician. Now the final question of this episode is, did you start your magical trip or not? And you think which stage you're in? Please share your comments with us. Remember, all people can take this journey. This way calls you.